My name is Jason Schiessl, and I'm here to talk to you about the oral presentation. I'm a year 2 teacher along with Mr. Toombs and Miss Snub, and we all are helping you facilitate the mock oral presentation. It's going to be your last mock oral until you do the real thing in a few months. So I want to talk to you today about what it takes to do this, how to help your SBC facilitate, record, and submit your oral presentation to the Dropbox, and just an overall how-to. So let's go ahead and get this party started. You'll see that with the document I have up here, your year 2 teacher has probably sent you something similar to this. We sent you something on week 34 about what films you have the choice to select from, and stating that you had 30 days to get this thing over and done. Obviously, at the end of week 37, we are right at that 30-day threshold. So later on this work week, in week 37, we ask you to record and submit those files. I've told my students that to schedule with the SBC a recording session Monday. That way, when you record, you have about 24 hours or so to submit the thing. If you have any issues on Monday, it also gives you some extra time to help overcome those issues and record it on Tuesday. So this document was sent out. Like I said, it gave you some deadlines and whatnot, just so you know the presentation deadlines. Right there, the 7th of October is that due date. That was actually Wednesday, the start of week 38. That's why I made mine at the end of week 37. You're going to know that right at the beginning of January, that's when the actual prescribed films will be sent out to you. You'll select it. As you see, the presentation week will start on the 3rd of February. Well, it won't start. You'll have it recorded by the 3rd of February. So if you ever have any questions about deadlines and what your calendar's going to be looking like for the first half of the year, that first email that was sent out in week 34 definitely has that information in there. As you move towards the end of this week, we're going to look at, we're going to look at a new email that was sent out about how to present this stuff. Obviously, just a review for the week. You want to respond to the pitches. You want to check out a production portfolio page on SeminoleCinemaWeebly.com if you're in Mr. Schiessl's class. Anybody else is more than welcome to look at that as well. You need to start looking at your journals and starting that stuff and saving any information relative to your production portfolio, because all that's going to be potentially used in your paperwork as you compile everything. Definitely read over the content and do the quiz. I suggest with my students to have that thing done by Friday of the week in question. That way you can focus on the major tasks and projects. It's not mandatory, but it's definitely suggested, and those that do that end up doing better in the class, I've found. Okay, so here we have the mock oral presentation. I say it's due on October 6th. Make sure that you've already have your presentation appointment with the SBC. Please note, I put MP4 there. You're really going to want to make this an MP3, so don't make it a video file, make it an audio file. So change that to MP3, everyone. And note that the Dropbox folder is probably going to say week 38 mock oral presentation, but it should be open for the end of week 37. Okay, you're going to find in my email, and I'm sure the other Year 2 teachers have sent this out as well, procedures for you and your SBC to follow. There's also a Marksheet that you'll want to take a look at. In my email I sent out, feel free to use the Marksheet to assess yourself. As you practice this week before you actually do it for real, record yourself. Use your phone. Use a digital video or digital audio recorder, and do your oral presentation. Practice, 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 right? And then when you do that, play it back, listen to how you're how you're presenting that information, and use the Marksheet to evaluate yourself. That's going to point out what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. And that'll also give you some time to overcome or address the issues that you may have as you finalize your presentation. Okay, so let's take a look at the procedures for students and SBCs. Just like all the other oral presentations you've done a few of them now, so this should be a piece of cake for all of you. And I know in my classes, the progression of success has been noteworthy. Obviously, your first oral presentations were probably the weakest, but now as we've continued through the course content and you guys are more and more comfortable with what the oral presentation is all about, as well as your mastery of the subject matter and the terminology used and just simply what to do and what to look at, you guys are getting better, which is great. For this mock oral, you're going to have 10 minutes, a 10-minute presentation on the extract that you've chosen. The presentation will be based on a film of your choosing and a 5-minute section within that film. Go over that 10 minutes. So definitely as you're practicing, you want to try to hit that 9 minutes and 30 seconds area, so that if you go long, you won't go too long and won't go over the 10-minute limit. If you are short, you're probably only going to go short at that 9-minute mark, which then you'll have a little bit of extra time to say anything else that you need to say. When you present this thing, it needs to take place in the presence of your SBC or coordinator. It needs to be recorded in a quiet place so that you won't be distracted. So if you know that bells are going to be going off, choose a time when you're not going to be interrupted by those bells. If you can find a room where bells or classmates or any sort of commotion might be going on, choose a place where you're going to be away from all that kind of stuff. It's only 10 minutes. Really, the whole process is probably going to take more like 15 minutes while you guys set up and tear down. So, if you can set 15-20 minutes aside to get this thing done, and so it's nice and quiet where you can focus, great. You can't prepare a script and then simply read it. You can have some memory aids or whatever. You can have 2 standard note cards with notes on both sides. You can also have a document that has selected screenshots from the film. But remember that, your oral presentation is all about your oral delivery. You're not going to be reading stuff. Um, you know, you can tell when somebody's reading something and when something's just somewhat extemporaneous. So go ahead and just, have your thoughts outlined, but not word for word. Give yourself some prompts that you can work off of. Okay. You need to know how to describe shot sequences and all the technical stuff so that you don't have to read it. Right, when you're beginning the assessment, you might want to just watch the extract one last time before you start. Most of my face-to-face students don't do this because they know the extract, forwards and backwards. They pretty much are experts at this sequence. But if you think that's going to help to get you into the mindset, go ahead and do it. It's not part of the presentation though, so if you want to do that, please allow some time, to do that before you actually set up and record. When you decide to record, you need to state the following information. I just call it a slate. So you want to slate your information before the OP starts. So you definitely want to say your name, the name of the film, the duration of the extract, so it shouldn't be more than 5 minutes, the start time of the extract, so give the timestamp of when it starts and when it ends, and then a description of what appears on the screen at the opening shot of the extract. So again, it's just a very brief description of just what's on the screen when it starts. So we have the introduction sample here. You can just fill in the blanks. And that's it. Then you take a pause and your SBC will say, your time begins now. And right after that statement, boom, you got 10 minutes to take care of business. During the recording, your SBC is not to, intervene, ask any questions, prompt you in any way. So they're just there in case something technical happens, and to also vouch for the fact that you are following the rules, which is just talking about your film and the film extract, as opposed to just simply reading off a script that you've already prepared. If you do end up finishing early, the SBC can simply say, is there anything else you'd like to add? If that's the case, you still do have that time, or however many minutes or seconds you have left. But most of the time, in my situation with the face-to-face students, I generally don't do that, because by the time they wrap things up, they're pretty much done. Again, planning ahead and making sure you hit that 9-minute and 30-second spot. 30 seconds isn't going to give you much time to talk about anything else. But obviously, if you hit 7 minutes and you got nothing else to say, there's a problem too. So hopefully you can spend some more time talking about things. But because you're planning, you're not going to just stop at 7 minutes. Right, everyone? After your recording, okay, what you want to do is you want to make sure you save that file as an MP3, and then deposit it into the Pamoja mock oral presentation Dropbox. Okay, MP3, MP3, MP3. Make sure you do that. And make sure you do this in the presence of your SBC. That way the SBC can vouch for the fact that you've done this thing and it's not been tampered with or anything like that. Okay, so that's that. Let's talk about the actual presentation mark sheet. So you don't have to fill any of this stuff out right now, but this is something that your teachers are going to be filling out, and we're going to be using this to assess what you've touched upon and how well you've touched upon it. So you'll see that, there's a little mark sheet here and some description about, okay, if you get a plus, it's excellent, a check is satisfactory, minus is limited. If you don't mention something, we just don't put anything there, or we put a minus in there. If you touch on something a little bit, maybe you've made an observation or identified something, but you haven't really gone into great detail about it, you might get a check or a minus depending on the depth. If you identify, articulate what the meaning was and that you've extracted from that element, and then you tie it into how it approaches the theme or main idea or the filmmaker's intent, that's when you're going to start scoring that plus and having excellent commentary. Also, providing specific support, whether it's you've like major observation and synthesized all of that stuff and articulated what that greater meaning is, and you back it up with a directorial comment or a critic's response, you're well on your way to doing something well or successful. You'll see that there's a number of different topics here or subjects here. What the easy thing would be is for someone to just summarize it, then talk about the extract, then talk about the social cultural context, talk about the target audience, talk about film criticism, and just simply going down the list and touching on everything. But the problem is that most people that try to do that will just touch on the surface of each one of these things. And if you touch on the surface of each one of these things, you're going to get minuses right down the line, and you're not going to do well. All right? Also, this is not providing a specific order in which to present. So even if you did go down the line and you do approach the subject matter in detail, your oral presentation, you're going to find, is not going to follow this order. Let's say that you're talking about, the generic expectations of a particular film. So if you're talking about a piece of film noir, all right, and how that, cinematic elements are helping achieve that noir feel. And that brings you to talking about the lighting, all right? And you start talking about the use of light and shadow, and maybe like, talking about how, they're not going for continuity of lighting, but they're, using expressionistic elements to provide meaning, all right? And let's say with the lighting, that takes you then to talk about how, the set, let's say, is also expressionistic and is more suggestive as opposed to achieving realism. Obviously, we're bouncing from lighting to set, and then possibly you're starting to talk about how the camera work also articulates, expressionistic elements by using Dutch tilts and low angle shots or high angle shots or whatever. We're bouncing all over the place. Just because the oral presentation and the way that you've, analyzed everything and you have a particular flow about it, it's going to just go to where you want it to go. So don't let this be just a listing of what to do first, what to do second, what to do third. Also, you're going to find that in 10 minutes, you might not be able to talk about all of this stuff. What you're better off doing is talking about as many of these things as you can that involve providing some sort of excellent comment or insight, okay? You don't want to just identify stuff. You don't want to just say, yeah, lighting was, you know, expressionistic. Well, that doesn't really mean anything, okay? So then if you start describing what the lighting looks like, that still isn't telling us a whole lot. Now, when you talk about how the lighting and how it's used is now articulating character or creating mood or touching on a particular theme, and then you start tying it into directorial intention, now we're starting to get to a place where it's not just identifying and very limited in nature, that it's actually providing some insight. And we get a chance to see your analytic skills and how you've extracted meaning. Again, tying it back to directorial or filmmaker or designer intention. You definitely want to take a look at that kind of stuff. And focus on that. You know, there might be a situation where the acting or characterization might not be vital to the extract. So you might want to focus a little bit more, again, on lighting and costume as opposed to the acting or characterization, all right? So some of these elements are going to complement one another, again, depending on your extract, and that's what's so unique about the oral presentation, is that there's not a cookie cutter way to attack this thing. It really depends on what you've pulled out of the extract, what meaning you've extracted from it, and what you can tie it to when it comes to when it comes to the film's message or theme or greater idea. You'll also notice, there's a time to talk about social cultural context, and don't take that literally. Sometimes a social cultural context is examining, what's going on in the society during the time period that is being presented. But honestly, most of the time a film, if it's a period film, is that thing's being produced or that story's being told because it's relevant to the time and the period and the place in which the film is created itself. You know what I'm saying? So, if you look at a story like The Crucible, if you talk about a play, well, yeah, it's taking place in, 1600 Salem, for the witch trials, and yet the play was created in the 1950s, and it addressed, McCarthyism and the McCarthy hearings when they're singling out, artists as communists. So it was sort of a witch trial in the 50s. So what is Arthur Miller really trying to do? Well, he's addressing the social cultural problems or the political issues that are facing society in the 50s. It wasn't about a bunch of witches, all right? So you want to keep that in mind when you're looking at these films, and try to figure out what's going on socially, politically, culturally, in the place and in the time during which the film was created. All right, so once you go through all that, once you go through all of that, what we'll do, the examiner, and in this case, since it's a mock oral, it'll be your teacher. We're going to listen to this, and we're going to have this little, mark sheet or whatever that's going to indicate how well you touched upon these things, or if you touched upon these things at all. All right? This is very similar to a mark band descriptor that, IB is going to be used, the IB examiners are going to be using. However, it doesn't give the numeric value of each thing. So what I'll do is I'll pull up the actual mark band descriptor here in a second. I'll show you where you can find that. But you'll see that, okay, you want to definitely provide an interpretation of the extract. Don't just describe it, interpret it. Tell us what meaning you're getting out of it. All right, you're gonna, and by doing that, you're hopefully going to showcase your understanding of how meaning's constructed by the use of film language. Now, again, that's cinematic language, so that's everything from editing, lighting, composition, framing, movement, all of those things. But as you're looking at those things and examining those things and talking about those things, you also want to make sure that you are using correct terminology. Don't just be general, all right? Use the proper terminology. So if instead of talking about, like, if you're describing a scene, we're seeing this person walk from frame left to frame right, and there's a mountain in the background and a river, and we see the entire boy's body. Don't do that. All right. What am I describing there? I'm describing a wide shot or an extreme wide shot. Okay. And it's not just describing what the shot is. Tell us why the filmmakers decided to shoot an extreme wide shot. Well, hopefully you know that extreme wide shots oftentimes are there to tell the audience given circumstances, or tell us information about the who, the what, the where, the when. All right, and as the shot gets closer and closer and closer, right, to a close-up or an extreme close-up, we then start looking at the character and what's going on with the character intellectually, emotionally, whatever, creating a closer relationship between the character and the audience. So you want to take a look at those things and make sure you articulate how those elements are expressing meaning and how it's applicable to what you're getting out of it and filmmaker's intent. Okay. You definitely want to put into context the extract in relationship to the entire film. So if I'm talking about the river scene in Night of the Hunter, I would need to express that this is immediately after the children are escape from the psycho killer preacher man, and as they journey down this river in a montage, they end up in the hands of an angel, a grandmotherly figure that is going to provide safe harbor for them. All right, so you want to talk about how this extract fits within the entire film, not just literally as well, but again, where are these characters, or where are we located within the story? So sometimes that would be an opportunity for you to talk about, like, where in the three act structure we're dealing with, or if you're talking about a hero's journey, consider Campbell's structure within the hero's journey of where this might actually take place, because that might help lead you to a greater understanding or deciphering greater meaning from the particular extract. All right. The explanation for the selection of the extract, a lot of people forget to do this. Tell us why you chose it. That's very simple. If you don't, though, remember, all we can do is give you a 1 out of here. But if you talk about, like, why you chose this thing, that's like just easy points. So tell us that. Don't just say I chose it because I liked it. Give us some greater insight into why you've decided to do this. Okay, obviously you want to talk about genre, because genre is setting up audience expectation, and of course, if they're telling a story, filmmakers are going to tell a story that that satisfies audience expectation and meets audience expectation, or breaks audience expectation, which then opens the door to talk about why they're doing that. Again, tying it to directorial intent. As I talked about before, where does this film fit in a broader social cultural context? Again, don't be so literal. Think about the time and place during which the film was made, not in which the story was being told, unless there's a direct relationship between the two. Always, always, always go back to director's intent or filmmaker's intent or designer's intent. Always, always, always tie it back to that and prove it if you can. Responses from audience and critics. This is well, audience response. We're not necessarily talking about like word for word what the audience is saying. What you want to do is you want to look at the box office receipts. What is the return as far as box office sales are concerned? That's where the audience speaks. They speak with their money. All right. So is it commercially successful, or is it critically successful? Or vice versa, critics. You want to focus on critics that are published critics. So critics that work for newspapers, trade magazines, that type of thing. You don't want to go to Rotten Tomatoes and pull out a quote from user I love movies 1972. You don't want to do that because that is not a published critic. That's just some fanboy that's just writing something on the web. All right. So somebody like Roger Ebert or Frank Rich or some of these people that make their living writing about films. Don't just do simple description. So you want to go into detail. Again, that's when you start talking about all of those, elements that we're talking about before. Okay, so don't just give us a literal explanation or description of what the scenario is or what's happening in an extract. Talk about these elements, the mise-en-scène elements specifically. Okay. And if you do all that, you're going to have a clear and thorough analysis. So you're not going to have this down here. You're going to be closer to this up here. Okay? So again, clear and thorough analysis is not just mumbling your way through the presentation, kind of like what I'm doing right now. But you definitely want to have a good, clear understanding of how meaning is being expressed by the film, and it's because of the filmmakers and all the designers and all the artistic decisions that are being made to help produce this film. I hope that clarifies some things as far as the mark bands are concerned, as well as the procedures and stuff. I'm going to show you a little something here. If you, go to seminolcinema.weebly.com and you go down to oral presentation, if you click on that, you're going to see a bunch of different, a bunch of information, because I just slam a bunch of stuff up there. You're going to see that there's a lot of stuff here to help you break down sections. If you break it into background and content for one part, another part looking at historical and institutional factors and social cultural context. Okay, if that is one part of your oral presentation, that's great. I would suggest you not spend more than like 3 minutes on all of that, because what we really want you to focus on and showcase is your textual analysis. So looking at the focused analysis and looking at these questions and answering, what's going on, in the narrative and what's going on with film language and how things are represented, you'll definitely want to, answer those questions and address those things. There's a sheet about, or there's details about planning. Obviously you're in week 4. So week 4 is all about practice, practice, practice. Okay. And when it comes to Monday or Tuesday in week 27, you're going to be, or 37, it's time to do the exam. All right, so check that stuff out. You'll notice that there are some exemplars, so if you want to ever look or listen to exemplars and their comments, you can always download these things or take a look at them. There are some of them that are posted up on the IBO. All right. Mark band descriptors. All right, so if you look at that, this is the form that will be used to evaluate things, and you'll notice that there are different point totals for all of this. All right, so as you get checked off on all these, please notice that the high is up here and the low is here, as opposed to the Word document where the high excellent was here and little or no was here. All right, so all of this information is still the same. All right, but you'll see that you'll have a rating 0 to 3. If you didn't do anything, you're gonna get 0 there. All right. If you did a little bit, maybe identify it, you might score a 3 on, or you might score something here, so you get a 1. I apologize. And let's say, you score a few more ones along here, and you end up with, let's say, 5 out of 25. Well, you'll see that 5 out of 25 will give you a 2. For your grade, which is not good. So you definitely want to work your way up and try to nail these 2 top mark bands up here, or these 2 top scoring areas. If you can go ahead and showcase good understanding, make sure that things are clear, make sure your references are clear, all that kind of stuff, you're going to score, higher up. All right, so if you score higher up, you're guaranteed at least a 5, and a 5 is good. All right, a 5 is definitely where you want to be. Remember, this thing is 25% of your overall grade, and I will tell you that the oral presentation, as far as my experience is concerned, students score higher on the oral presentation than any other of the IB assessments. So if you can, obviously score a 7, but if you score in the 6 or 7, and let's say you score a 3 or 4 in your independent study, which the independent study is very difficult, so scoring higher on that's more difficult, you can start working your way up into that 5 and 6 area with 50% of your overall grade. And then, hey, look, with your production portfolio, hopefully you're not scoring higher or lower than a 5, so you get that nice 5 score. Okay, I know I just rattled a lot of stuff off, and it might make sense, it might not make sense. If it doesn't, please make sure and contact me or contact your teachers, and they'll better explain that. It's kind of hard to explain it and not have anybody raising their hand and asking questions. But definitely, as you're working through this thing and practicing, you definitely want to make sure that you're reaching these top 2 columns. I know it's hard to explain what the difference is between good awareness and satisfactory awareness, but again, like I've said before, if you can not just identify, because identifying is just going to be, in the first 2 columns, but then extract meaning, well, now we're about in the middle. All right, but then if you can tie that into directorial intent, filmmaker intent, designer intent, you're going to be up here in the highest 2 columns. Okay. There are a couple of structure suggestions here. I think these structure suggestions are for higher level, though. You want to make sure that you don't follow higher level, because higher level, they have more time. You only have a 10-minute time period to do this. So you definitely want to make sure you follow standard level procedures, not higher level procedures. I I think that's about it. I'm going to sign off for now. Hopefully everything recorded well, because I've done this session in BBB and it didn't seem to record. So hopefully this will suffice. Again, if you have any questions, you can contact me, Mr. Schiessl, or contact your year 2 teachers. We wish you well. Again, if you have questions or if your SBCs have questions, please contact the teachers earlier in the Pamoja week as opposed to at the last minute Tuesday night at 11, 50. You definitely don't want to do that. All right. Take care of business. Schedule your appointment. Practice, practice, practice. Use the Marksheet to help you out. And break a leg.